Most people walk into a bar expecting noise, laughter and maybe a strong drink. But on one strange night in a small Tennessee town, a group of loud bikers pushed their luck far beyond the limit. They mocked a quiet old man in the corner. They thought he was just another elderly stranger mindering his business. They thought he was harmless. They thought they could push him around for fun. They were wrong. And when they learned who he really was, the color drained from their faces so fast that even the regulars went silent. This is the night everything changed inside Logan's Tavern. And it all began with a choice that seemed small at first but carried the weight of a lifetime. The bar was full that evening. A preacher hit a story sitting on a tee. Forks tapped plates. People shouted over a football game playing on a dusty screen. The country music from the old jukebox gave the place a heartbeat that everyone moved to. It was the sort of night where strangers felt like neighbors and neighbors felt like family. But in the back of the room, away from the laughter and the crowded counter, sat an elderly man named Mark Avery. He sat alone at a wooden table that he'd seen more stories than most people tell in a lifetime. A single lamp above him cast a warm light over the wrinkles on his face. He wore a faded brown jacket and an old navy blue cap that carried subtle stitched marks from decades ago. Nothing about him screamed for attention, yet there was something unusual about the way he held himself. Straight posture. Steady hands. A calm, almost unshakable presence. He sipped his drink slowly. Not hurried. Not restless. Just steady. A man content with the quiet. No one knew much about him. A few regulars greeted him out of habit but never pushed for details. Everyone simply called him a Merkel. Older than most men in the room. Quieter than all of the room. But respected for reasons no one could fully explain. Then the front door swung open with a force that made a foot storm. 6 bikers walked in. Black jackets. Heavy boots. Chains that rattled with every step. Their laughter stormed into the room before they even reached the counter. Their leader, a tall broad man named Brick, stood out instantly. A thick beard. A loud voice. A grin that showed he enjoyed attention. He acted like he owned any room he walked into. The regulars knew the group well. Not criminals. Just troublemakers who enjoyed pushing people around. People avoided a contact with the room. It was easier that way. Brick shouted for VHS men to grab a table. They dropped into their seats with the confidence of people who expected the world to move aside for the room. Then one of the younger bikers named Kyle nudged the VHS free and tilted his chin toward the back of the bar. Look at the old guy sitting alone. Looks like he missed his busy time. The others snickered. A few customers lowered their heads, hoping the bikers would ignore the man in the corner. No one wanted the night to turn ugly. But trouble always starts with a small spark. Kyle stood up again. He stared at Merkel for a long second. A mocking smile crept onto his face. Bet he doesn't even know what the it is, Kyle said loudly. A few people shifted in their chairs. A woman near the counter whispered to her friend to leave it alone. But once a bully finds a target, stopping him becomes the hardest thing in the world. Merkel didn't react. Not a flinch. Not a word. He simply lifted his glass and took another sippy. That silence made the bikers restless. They wanted a reaction. They wanted attention. And Merkel wasn't giving Tara many. Brick leaned back in his chair. He watched the old man with a smirk that held more evil than reason. Maybe he's one of those retired soldiers, Brick said loud enough for the bar to hear. We should go thank him for his service. The men laughed in a way that made it clear they didn't mean gratitude. Behind the counter, the bartender Mark looked up sharply. Mark was in his late 50s, tall and worn from long years of dealing with angry drunks and broken bottles. But he had a strong sense of when trouble was about to start. He stepped forward. Brick, leave him alone, Mark said calmly. He's just enjoying his drink. But Brick ignored him. He pushed himself out of his chair and cracked his knuckles. His men followed behind him like shadows ready to misbehave. The entire atmosphere inside Logan's Tavern shifted. Conversation slowed. Forks paused in midair. Music from the jukebox suddenly felt further away. Always drifted toward the old man in the back. Merkel still hadn't moved. He didn't brace himself. He didn't panic. He simply set each drink down with the precision as if he already knew what was coming. Brick stopped right beside the old man's table. Each shadow stretched across the floor. Well now, Brick said with a smile that wasn't friendly at all. That's a pretty interesting hit you got there, old-timer. Merkel looked up calmly for the first time. Bitch's eyes were clear. Focused. Not frightened. Not irritated. Just true. What can I do for you? He asked softly. Brick leaned closer. You're just trying to make conversation. The hook tightened around the room like a rope being pulled. No one knew it yet, but this was the moment everything began to shift. The next step would change the whole night. And once it happened, there would be no turning back. Brick's grin widened as he hovered over Merchel's table. The rest of the bikers formed a loose circle around the old man as if they were closing in on easy prey. The bar grew quiet enough that the soft hum of the old refrigerator behind the counter became the only steady sound in the room. Kyle stepped forward first. He had a jumpy kind of energy, the sort that made you with poor judgment. He flicked each gaze between Brick and the old man, waiting for a signal. Come on, Kyle said. Let's see what Grandpa's hiding under that calm face. A couple of customers exchanged their anxious looks. Nobody wanted to intervene, but everyone felt that the situation was spiraling faster than anyone expected. Merkel sat perfectly still. Bitch's back remained straight, Bitch's breathing steady. He didn't flinch when Kyle reached for the brim of Bitch's cap. He simply lifted Bitch's hand and gently tapped the younger man's wrist away. Respect goes a long way, Merkel said quietly. Kyle blinked, surprised by the calm response. He hadn't expected resistance. And he certainly hadn't expected it to come without fear. Brick stepped in, eager to reclaim attention. He kicked out the empty chair across from Merkel and sent it skidding across the floor. The scraping sound made a few people jump. Even the jukebox seemed to hesitate between songs. You're in our spot, Brick said. We don't like being ignored. Merkel looked up again. I'm not in your way, he said. You boys are free to enjoy your evening. Kyle snorted. Evening. It's almost midnight. This guy probably hasn't stayed up this late in 10 years. More snickering from the group. The joke didn't land with the crowd though. The room stayed tense, uneasy. Something about making the quiet old man didn't feel brave. It felt desperate. Mark, the bartender, took a step closer. Bitch's voice tightened. Brick. Back off. I'm not asking twice. Brick didn't turn round. Relax, Mark. You're just talking. No harm done. Mark clenched Bitch's jaw but stayed behind the counter. Bitch's hands tightened round the towel it been using to wipe a glass. Bitch's eyes never left Merkel. Brick reached out and snatched the cap off the old man's head before anyone could react. Gasps scattered through the room. It wasn't just the action. It was the disrespect behind it. The Carel's cruelty. Brick then gurgled the cap between two fingers. What's the supposed to be anyway? Some old club? He asked. Looks like something a guy picks up from a thrift store. Merkel stood up slowly. The movement wasn't aggressive. It wasn't rushed. But it carried weight. A quiet authority settled over him. He was slightly shorter than Brick but something about the way he rose made the size difference irrelevant. That cap, Merkel said, is not yours. The tone in Bitch's voice made Kelly's smirk fade. Something about the old man's calmness reminded him of someone giving a final warning before consequences arrived. Brick laughed again but this time the sound carried a thin layer of uncertainty. You want it back? Then tell us what it means. What makes you so special? The old man lifted Bitch's gaze. I don't need to prove anything to you. Kyle looked at Brick for guidance, unsure of what to do next. The bravado they had walked in with now felt brittle, fragile. A woman near the bar whispered to her friend, Mark needs to stop this. But Mark stayed rooted behind the counter. He knew something the others didn't. Something that made him cautious. Something that made him wait. The tension tightened like a rope pulling from both ends. Merkel stepped closer to Brick until they were only a few feet apart. Bitch's hands remained at Bitch's sides, relaxed but ready. You boys should think carefully, he said. You don't know the road you're trying to go down. Kyle barked a that even he didn't fully believe. Road? What are you talking about? Brick shoved the cap closer to the old man's chest. Stop talking in riddles. Who are you really? For the first time all night, a hint of something sharp flickered across the old man's expression. Not anger. Not fear. Something else. Something old. Something practiced. Before he could respond, Mark finally shattered the tension with a voice louder than anyone expected. Brick, he called out. Drop the act. Give him the cap. The leader turned round with irritation. Why do you care so much about some old man's head? Mark didn't blink. Because that isn't just a head. The room froze. Even people who had tried to mind their business were now fully alert. Something was about to reveal itself. Something heavy. Something unexpected. Brick lowered the cap slightly. He turned back to Merkel with a confused scowl. What's he talking about? He asked. The old man didn't answer. He simply watched Tavern with an expression that carried exhaustion and patience in equal measure. It was the look of someone who had lived through a storm that had solved imaginary and survived each one. The silence in the bar grew thick. Everyone felt the pressure building, even though no one understood why. The truth was hanging in the air like a held breath. And once released, nothing in the room would ever be the same again. Brick stared at the cap in H.S. hint as if it had suddenly gotten heavier. The puzzlement on H.S. face slowly shifted into irritation. He didn't like feeling confused, and he liked even less that the bartender had spoken to him with such certainty. Mark stepped out from behind the counter. Every person in the room watched him move, as if even the floorboards quieted under H.S. steps. You really don't recognize him, Mark said, coming to stand a few feet away from Brick. H.S.'s voice was steady, but there was something deeper beneath it. Something close to disbelief. Brick frowned. What are you talking about? Is just some quiet old guy. Mark pointed at the cup Brick held. That belonged to Commander Cole Avery. One of the most decorated servicemen this country has ever seen. The words rippled through the bar like a shockwave. A few people inhaled sharply. Others exchanged distant looks. Even the jukebox seemed to stall on the first beat of the next song. Brick blinked. Commander who? Mark didn't raise H.S. voice. He didn't need to. Every person in the room was hanging on H.S. next entrance. Commander Avery led rescue missions during the Blackwater conflict. Missions that yearned supposed to succeed. Missions where most men wouldn't make it out alive. Kyle swallowed. H.S. earlier making bravado fell rupees BYPs. Brick slowly lowered the cap until it hovered just above H.S. hand. H.S. fingers trembled. He didn't want Tavern to, but they did anyway. He let men into danger, Mark continued, and brought Tavern home. And when he told and bring Tavern home, he made sure no one ever forgot Tavern. The room felt smaller now, crowded with the weight of what Mark was saying. Someone near the counter whispered, It's him. Here. A man at the bar nodded quietly. Ivy heard stories about Avery. Thought he was long gone. Brick shook his head. No way. You're missing pieces. Mark turned to him slowly. I served under him. And I wouldn't mistake that face. Not even after all these years. A new silence fell over the room. Not the teensy kind from earlier. A deeper one. The kind that comes only when truth demands attention. Merkel didn't move. He stood there with a quiet expression, still calm, still composed, as if Mark's words had simply confirmed what he had tried to avoid revealing. Brick opened H.S. mouth to argue, but the words stuck in H.S. throat. He wasn't sure whether to challenge the truth or drop the cap and walk out of the bar entirely. The old man finally reached out H.S. hand. Noof, Merkel said, H.S. voice firm but gentle. Let it be. Brick hesitated. For the first time since stepping into Logan's Tavern, he looked genuinely unsure. Confusion wrestled with pride and something else shame. He placed the cap back into the old man's hand to it or a fight. Merkel took it and slid it onto the table as calmly as it set H.S. drink earlier. H.S. movements carried no anger. Only control. Kelly's voice cricket as he spoke. Sir, you're really him. Merkel turned H.S. head. H.S. softened for a brief moment, as if he didn't want the past dragged into the present. I was just doing my job, he said. Nothing more. Brick let out a shaky exhale. H.S. Teofni scrambled a little more with every second. The old man's presence was not loud or intimidating, yet it filled the room in a way none of the bikers could match. Mark folded his arms. Doing you a job. You carried injured soldiers across enemy lines when you hit Nabokov. You survived the missions that were declared hopeless before they even started. People talk about you like you're a legend. The old man sighed. Legends are just stories. I'm not one of those. But the way the room looked at him said otherwise. Kyle stepped back, rubbing the back of his neck. Man, we didn't know that. That's the trouble with people, McCall replied quietly. You shouldn't have to know Somionis' history to give them respect. The sentence struck harder than any punch could have. Bridges' expression shifted again. He wasn't angry now. He wasn't mocking. He looked like a man realizing the ground beneath him wasn't what he thought it was. You boys walked in here wanting the night to revolve around you, McCall said. But strength isn't about noise or shoulders or the size of your group. He paused. The bar leaned closer, waiting. Strength is about what you're willing to carry. And who you're willing to protect. Brick swallowed hard. The weight of the words pressed against him like a reminder of a life it never lived. McCall let his hand rest on the cap. His voice remained steady. Sit down. Listen. Because you're walking a path that doesn't lead where you think it does. The bikers didn't dare speak. Not yet. Something deeper was coming. A truth they weren't ready for. A story that would strike them harder than anything they'd ever heard. McCall lured himself back into his chair with slow, steady movements, but something about the way he sat sent a fresh wave of tension through the air. He wasn't shrinking. He wasn't retreating. He was settling into a position of authority that no one in the room questioned anymore. The bikers didn't move at first. They hovered awkwardly, shifting from foot to foot like boys waiting outside a principal's office. Brick finally dropped into the chair across from the old man, which his confidence stripped down to something raw and hesitant. Kyle and the others followed, dragging over whatever seats were closest. The room stayed quiet. Every patron in Logan's Tavern leaned in, pretending not to study but unable to look away. Something important was about to be said, something none of them wanted to miss. McCall rested his hands on the table. They were agate hands, lined and worn, but steady in a way that made people rethink their understanding of strength. There was a time, he began, when I thought strength was lowered. When I thought being the biggest voice in the room meant I was in control. Brick looked up slowly, understanding the direction of the words but not ready to speak. I was barely 19, McCall continued. Fresh out of training. Full of pride. Thought I had everything figured out. He paused, letting the room sink into the memories he was pulling from. Then reality hit me hard. My first deployment was nothing like the stories they tell young recruits. The days were long. The heat pressed on your bones. Every step felt like it could be your last. I learned quickly that fear doesn't care how of you are to act. Kyle said frozen, absorbing every word. Which earlier cockiness was gone, replaced by something closer to respect and curiosity. There was a mission, McCall said. One that stayed with me. 2 of our men were trapped on the edge of a ravine during a firefight. We were told to fall back. Too risky. Too many unanswered. He shook his head. But leaving there wasn't an option. The bar grew even quieter, as if the floor itself wanted to hear. We moved in a new way, he continued. Fire coming from every direction. Smoke so thick you could barely breathe. And we found them barely holding on. We picked them up and carried them through a storm most people never see in their lives. Bridges' jaw clenched. He didn't interrupt. We made it back, McCall said. But 2 others didn't. Good men. Brave men. And when you carry someone out of danger and realize someone else didn't make it home, that stays with you. GT teaches you something no classroom or bar fight ever could. BHS fingers traced the brim of his cap where it lay on the table. That day is the reason I never judge a man too quickly. The loudest one in the room is often the most afraid of being seen. The quietest one is usually carrying stories he never asked for. Class is dropped to the floor. Brick took a slow breath, the truth settling inside him layer by layer. McCall leaned forward slightly. I held the young men who whispered to me about their families, he said. I vi stod in places where hope vastin and fear vastic. And I learned something important. Real strength is quiet. IT da isn't advertise itself. IT da isn't shove its way around a room to feel big. The bikers didn't speak. Even their breathing slowed. Real strength, Merkel said, is doing what's right when you're unsure, scared or alone. It's protecting people who can't protect themselves. It's walking through a fear and coming out changed, but not broken. Brick shifted in each's seat, which his hands tightening together. I look at you boys, Merkel continued, and I see what I said to see in myself. The belief that the world owes you something. That noise and attitude make you powerful. But it isn't. Not really. He let the words hang for a moment. Power is knowing you can share someone and choosing not to. It's seeing weakness in others and choosing to lift it instead of stepping on it. One of the younger bikers swallowed hard. BCS is glistened with something unspoken. Merkel studied theorem 1by1. You think walking into a bar and battering an old man makes you strong, he said. But that just means you haven't learned what strength is. Brick opened BCS mouth, then closed it again. He rubbed the back of BCS neck, BCS voice faint when he finally spoke. I didn't know, he said quietly. We didn't know any of that. We were just joking around. Merkel shook BCS head gently. You shouldn't need a man's history to treat him with decency. That sentence struck the room with more force than any shout could have. Brick's shoulders sagged. Kyle's hands trembled lightly on the edge of the table. We messed up, Kyle murmured. We messed up but... You did, Merkel replied. But mistakes are just lessons waiting to be understood. The question is what you do next. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Brick finally forced himself to look the old man in the eyes. I don't want to be that guy, Brick said quietly. Not anymore. And that, Merkel replied, is where change begins. The bikers stayed silent. Not out of fear now, but reflection. Something in the air was shifting, breaking open, becoming something new. And the night hasn't finished with the air yet. Brick stared at the table for a long moment, which his fingers curled into a loose fist, not out of anger but out of regret he didn't know how to hide. The others watched him, waiting for him to speak. They were followers by habit, but tonight they needed him to take the first real step of the air he'd taken in years. Kyle cleared HA's throat, which his voice barely above a whisper. Sir, you're sorry. All of us. We shouldn't have treated you that way. The words trembled, not from fear but from honesty. They rang to set to speaking like that. Merkel nodded once. An apology is the first step, he said. But what matters more is what you choose to carry after tonight. Brick lifted HA's eyes slowly. They were different now. Not challenging. Not mocking. Just open. I didn't know who you were, Brick said. I didn't know what that cap meant. I didn't know what you were seen or done. Merkel let out a quiet breath. You didn't have to know. Respect shouldn't be earned through scars or stories. GT should be offered because you're all more complicated than we looked. Brick swallowed hard, the truth landing with the weight of years he hadn't lived. He pushed HA's chair back and stood up. BC's voice came softer than anyone in the room had ever heard from him. Thank you, Brick said. For everything you've done. For what you said. And for not losing patience with fools like us. Merkel rose to HA's feet as well. This time the movement seemed lighter, as if the tension that had filled the air earlier had finally loosened its grip. Brick stepped forward and extended HA's hand. After a moment, Merkel accepted the handshake. HA's grip was firm but calm, steady as ever. Kyle stood next, then the others. One by one, they murmured their apologies. Some spoke quickly. Some hesitated. But every voice carried sincerity. The shame they felt wasn't shallow. It was the kind that sticks and reshapes a person from the inside out. Mark watched quietly from the counter, arms folded, eyes softer than they had been all night. When the bikers finished their apologies, he stepped closer and gave Brick a quick nod. You boys did the right thing, Mark said. Nobody expects you to be perfect. Just better than you were 5 minutes ago. Brick nodded slowly. We can do that, he said. We need to. Merkel sat back down, but this time he didn't feel alone. The barasn't watching him with fear or confusion anymore. They watched him with a quiet respect that didn't need applause or attention. It simply existed. He took a breath, tense Paquet once more, and his voice carried through the room with the strength of a man who had earned every scratch. You boys think life gives you endless chances, he said. But it doesn't. People remember the harm you do more than the jokes you make. Choose who you want to be before you run out of time. Kyle nodded quickly, tears straightening his compass. Brick larked his gaze, absorbing the words as if they were being carved into his mind. Merkel continued, with his tone unwavering. I've seen men turn their lives round after mistakes. And I've seen men walk so far down the wrong path they couldn't find their way back. The difference wasn't age. It wasn't strength. It was humility. He glanced at each of them. Humility is what saves you. Pride is what destroys you. The message settled over the group like a final lesson carved in stone. Brick stepped back, exhaling slowly, and looked toward his crew. Let's sit, he said quietly. You're only causing trouble. The transformation in his voice was impossible to ignore. The other bikers nodded and returned to their table not with loud laughter or heavy steps, but with a heavy humility. They didn't grab their drinks right away. They just sat there, silently processing the night. For a long moment, Logan's Tavern remained quiet. People turned to their conversations again but with softer tones. The atmosphere wasn't tense anymore. It was thoughtful, reflective. Something rare had passed through the room. Merkel reached for his glass, took a small sip and set it down again. His gaze drifted toward the window, where the outside world waited in its own kind of silence. Mark approached the table and stood beside him. You all right? He asked gently. Merkel nodded. Just tired, he said. Long days catch up to old bones. Mark smiled faintly. You still carry more strength than any of those boys combined. Merkel didn't answer. He didn't need to. After finishing his drink, he stood up, placed a hand on the brim of his cap and walked toward the door. The bar watched him, not out of curiosity but out of quiet respect. The kind that doesn't demand recognition but gives it gladly. Just before he stepped outside, Merkel paused and looked back at the room. Remember something, he said. Respect doesn't cost you anything. But the lack of it might cost you more than you can afford. The words hung in the air like a final reminder. He pushed the door open and stepped into the cool night, disappearing beyond the warm glow of the bar's windows. Inside, Brick sat with his hands clasped. He wasn't the same man who had walked in earlier. He finally lifted his head and spoke to his crew in a low voice. You've got to do better. All of us. No more acting like idiots. No more pretending you're too off. We change. Starting now. Kyle nodded without hesitation. The rest followed, each man taking in the moment with a kind of reverence none of them had expected to feel tonight. At the counter, Mark gathered a Merchol's empty glass, looking at it for a long second before setting it aside. That's a man worth learning from, he said quietly, almost to himself. And with that, Logan's Tavern returned to its usual architecture. But the echoes of what had happened lingered like a lesson carved into the wood itself. A lesson that would not fade with time. A lesson no one in that bar would ever forget. The night ended the way it had begun, but everyone inside walked out changed, carrying something they hadn't expected. A deeper understanding of strength, humility and the quiet kind of courage that can silence even the loudest room.